Israel continues to intensify airstrikes over residential buildings in Lebanon. The Lebanese Foreign Ministry condemns Israeli assaults on UNIFIL centers in Lebanon. And dozens of Gazans in Qnews gather to bid farewell to their relatives and loved ones killed in recent Israeli airstrikes. Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock Cairo local time and you're watching Q News. We're going to start with the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Israel and Hezbollah have exchanged fire across the Lebanon and Israel border as a US envoy arrived in Beirut for talks on ceasefire conditions. Explosions were heard over northern Israel as air defense systems intercepted a barrage of Hezbollah rockets. The Israeli army reported 25 rockets launched from Lebanon into Israeli territory. US Special Envoy Amos Hochstein has met with Lebanese Speaker of Parliament Nabih Berri during his first visit to the region following Israel's intensified aggression against Lebanon. Hochstein's visit aims to explore diplomatic solutions to the ongoing conflict, with discussions planned with both Israeli and Lebanese officials. His meetings in Lebanon focus on advancing a settlement through US mediation. Hochstein has made several visits to the region in recent months as tensions in southern Lebanon continue to escalate. The Israeli occupation army has released a video claiming it shows strikes against dozens of facilities used by Hezbollah in Lebanon. According to the Israeli military, these strikes targeted areas in Beirut, southern Lebanon, and deep within Lebanese territory. Hezbollah has not yet commented on the situation. The death toll from Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon amid the Israel-Hezbollah conflict has surpassed 2,460, with injuries reported at over 11,530. The Lebanese Health Ministry confirmed that 16 people were killed and 59 others wounded in recent Israeli attacks. In response, the Israeli occupation forces announced that they are currently conducting ground raids in southern Lebanon based on precise intelligence. Axios has reported, citing an American official, that Lebanon and the international community are unlikely to accept Israel's conditions for a ceasefire. The report indicates that one of Israel's demands is to allow its forces to participate in effective implementation measures to prevent the rearmament of Hezbollah. Israel has submitted its request for ending the war in Lebanon to the White House. And to discuss this further, we go across to Rihem, who's in the newsroom. Rihem.
Thank you, Mark. To help us analyse the situation in Lebanon after the intensified Israeli airstrikes in the past few hours, we're joined by the expert at Al-Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies, Bashir Abdel Fattah. Welcome to Q News. Thank you, sir, for joining us. First, let me ask you about the key factors driving the increase of tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, and how do you think this impacts Lebanon's general stability?
I think the Israeli occupation army is trying to put an end to the war of aggression that Iran declared against Israel 20 years ago, using its proxies in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Iraq, and Syria as well. So the Israeli occupation army now is trying to strike the military infrastructure of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and to delete all the roads which is used to transfer weapons from Iran to Hezbollah in South Lebanon. But this led to destroying the infrastructure in Lebanon, and also the refugees and displaced thousands, tens of thousands of refugees and displaced from southern Lebanon into the north. So I think the stability of Lebanon and the whole Middle East area will be affected by the Israeli occupation army process in Lebanon.
We can get back to the idea of like the stability of Lebanon and the political dynamics generally, but you spoke about the idea that Israel is attempting to, cut off the war of attrition that's happening towards it. But is this something that is actually feasible? Because despite, pummeling the Lebanese, South Lebanon, Hezbollah has still managed to send out drones into the heart of Israel.
Yes, I agree with you completely, because it is impossible to delete completely or to eliminate a resistance group like Hezbollah, because of the military doctrine and the ideology from the beginning. You can easily strike Hezbollah as a military structure, but it will be impossible to eliminate Hezbollah as an ideology or idea or a doctrine of how to resist the occupation army. So till now, and after the strikes, many strikes from Israel against Hezbollah, he can resist, and he is remain satisfying and also struggling against the Israeli occupying army. So I don't think that Israel could eliminate Hezbollah, and in the future, and evidence of that till now, Israel didn't succeed to restore the Israeli displaced from the settlements of the northern Israel, like Al-Jalil, Al-A'la, and Al-Jalil Al-Gharbi. So they still suffering from displaced more than 100 thousands of the Israelis still displaced from northern Israel to Eilat and Tel Aviv. So I don't think that the Israeli army could eliminate Hezbollah, and they will still suffering from the resistance and the war of attrition from Hezbollah. Otherwise, they should accept the completely implementation for the resolution 1701.
Let's go back to the idea that you spoke about earlier, where it has affected the stability in general of Lebanon. Now that Israel has actually weakened Hezbollah relatively, do you think that this could affect the political dynamics within Lebanon?
We can say that to some extent the Israelis might succeed to do that. But at the end, I think Lebanon is immune against the foreign interference, political interference, especially if you try to play with the ethnic ties and the ethnic structure in Lebanon, because under this aggression, Israeli aggressions, the Lebanese still on good terms together, and they still immune against the ethnical influence. So I think the Israeli strikes weakened Hezbollah, but still the Lebanese political structure. In the beginning, you will be electing the president of Lebanon, a new president of Lebanon, which reflects the patriotism in Lebanon.
Sir, could you tell us a bit about the long-term strategies that you believe Lebanon should pursue to achieve sustainable peace and security in the face of the Israeli aggression, and what can the international community do to sort of help out and calm things down in this part of the region?
First of all, we should restore the state of Lebanon, the sovereignty of Lebanon. And this comes from stopping or putting an end to the foreign interference in Lebanon, either from Iran or from Israel or any other international actor. So we can say that the beginning, we can begin from the complete implementation of the International Resolution 1701. And we should not accept any suggestions from Israel or from the Americans to make some sort of redesigning the resolution or reformatting the resolution 1701. So I think restoring the sovereignty of Lebanon and the withdrawal of the Israeli army is a good beginning for restoring Lebanon, and it will be a long-term strategy in order to maintain stability and peace in the Middle East as a whole and in Lebanon in particular.
Okay, that was the expert at Al-Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies, Bashir Abdel Fattah. Thank you so much for your insights and for your opinions. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Riham. Now, Israeli airstrikes have intensified across southern Lebanon, hitting key areas in Beirut and beyond, as tensions continue to escalate. Despite international calls for a ceasefire, Israeli aggression shows no signs of abating.
Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon have escalated, with the southern suburbs of Beirut enduring 11 strikes, including one targeting a finance organization near Rafiq Hariri International Airport, which Israel claims finances Hezbollah. These attacks are part of a broader campaign against Hezbollah-linked financial institutions, with 7 strikes concentrated in the southern suburbs alone. In addition, Israeli aircraft hit Tyre Daba in Tyre, launched 6 raids around Harat Harik municipality, and struck the outskirts of Sheba. The bombings also extended to the old airport road in southern Beirut. Fires erupted in the forests of Kafr Kila, Marjayun, after Israeli incendiary bombs ignited olive trees. Kafr Kila was subjected to heavily artillery shelling, and a house in the Beit Jibel district was destroyed by an airstrike, injuring 3 civilians. As a result of the ongoing aggression, the mayor of Sidon ordered the evacuation of key municipal buildings, police headquarters, and the operations room to shelter displaced residents from the south. Despite international calls for a ceasefire, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has refused to halt the attacks on Lebanon. U.S. media, citing American and Israeli officials, revealed that Israel recently submitted a proposal to Washington outlining conditions for a diplomatic resolution to the conflict. However, a U.S. official expressed doubts about Beirut or the international community accepting these terms, as they would undermine Lebanon's sovereignty. Meanwhile, Israel continues issuing evacuation warnings to residents in Tyre, Nabatea, Mashgara, and surrounding areas, further escalating tensions in the region.
The Lebanese news agency has reported that an Israeli airstrike on a residential building in Baalbek has resulted in the deaths of 6 women and children, with 8 others sustaining injuries. The attack resulted in the destruction of the building and damage to nearby homes, with injuries ranging from critical to minor. The injured were transferred to hospitals for treatment. Large explosions and a massive fire have erupted near Beirut's international airport, filling the area with thick smoke. Planes were seen landing shortly before the blasts from nearby Babda, as hostilities between the Israeli army and Hezbollah escalated. In response, hundreds of residents have fled their homes after Israel warned of impending attacks on sites linked to Hezbollah's financial operations, instructing people to evacuate those areas immediately. Meanwhile, Beirut airport is operating normally despite heavy Israeli airstrikes in the vicinity. Video footage has showed planes taking off and landing without disruption from the ongoing aggression. Lebanese authorities have confirmed their commitment to keeping the airport, the international airport, operational and ensuring safety, even as international airlines announced flight suspensions to Lebanon. The Lebanese Foreign Ministry has condemned Israeli assaults on UNIFIL centres and Israel's demand for the evacuation of its positions. It emphasised that such attacks are not merely targeting international forces, but represent a blatant violation of international law that could amount to war crimes. The ministry called on the international community to take a firm stance on UNIFIL. Its operations continue without interference or threats to its security and safety. It also praised forces for their roles in maintaining peace and security in southern Lebanon and enhancing regional stability. The Egyptian Foreign Minister, Badr Abdel Ati, has discussed the rapidly evolving situation in Lebanon and Egypt's intensive efforts to contain the crisis in the region with Lebanese Speaker Nabiha Berri. The Egyptian Foreign Minister confirmed Israel's violations of Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity during the phone call. Abdel Ati denounced Israeli attacks on the Lebanese army, Lebanese facilities and UNIFIL forces in southern Lebanon, stressing the need for all parties to adhere to UN Security Council Resolution 1701 in its entirety. Now let's get the latest developments in Gaza.
The United States stands with Israel.
أكدت مصر على الرفض التام للتأجير القسري للفلسطينيين. لن نرحل.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children.
Israel must, in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention,
תפנו את הלחצים שלכם נגד החמאס ונגד הפטרון שלה, איראן.
The Israeli army has ordered displaced persons in shelters in the Jabalia camp to evacuate. This comes as reports announce the deaths of 18 Palestinians and injuries to several others after an Israeli strike targeting displaced individuals in the Jabalia camp in northern Gaza. The Israeli Air Force has launched a series of airstrikes on western Jabalia with artillery units targeting the center of the camp. Video footage has shown horrific scenes of injured children at the Kabal Adwan hospital due to the ongoing Israeli aggression in northern Gaza and the siege on hospitals. Hospital director Osam Abu Safia reported heavy shelling and gunfire around the facility, noting that Israeli forces targeted water tanks and the hospital's electrical network last night. Dozens of Gazans in Qnews gathered to bid farewell to their relatives and loved ones killed in recent Israeli airstrikes. Israel has escalated its attacks in Gaza and Lebanon just days after the assassination of the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar raised hopes for potential ceasefire talks. Israel remains committed to eradicating Hamas, but has in the process devastated large portions of the territory, killing tens of thousands of people. Over 1.9 million people are now homeless and facing a severe humanitarian crisis. The death toll in Gaza has now surpassed 42,600 since Israeli attacks began on October 7th, 2023. According to Gaza-based health authorities, in the past 24 hours alone, 84 Palestinians were killed and 158 others were wounded, pushing the total number of injured people to nearly 100,000. The Gazan government's media office reported that a strike on the residential area of Beit Lahia in northern Gaza resulted in significant casualties. In a statement, Gazan authorities have condemned the United States, Britain, Germany and France, holding them responsible for what they called terrorist attacks by Israel. So to the economy, and China lowered its benchmark lending rates, aligning with expectations as part of ongoing efforts to stimulate the economy. The one-year loan prime rate dropped by 25 basis points to 3.1%, while the five-year loan prime rate also fell by 25 basis points to 3.6%. These rate cuts follow reductions in other policy rates last month, including a cut to banks' reserve requirement ratio in a bid to support the struggling property sector and boost consumption. This marks the most aggressive stimulus package since the pandemic. Oil prices increased on Monday, recouping some of last week's more than 7% decline on worries about demand in China and easing concerns about potential supply disruptions in the Middle East. Brent crude futures were up 1.6% to $74.22 a barrel, and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were up 1.9% to $70.54 a barrel. Gold prices surged for the fifth consecutive day, reaching a record high amid concerns over the U.S. election, escalating tensions in the Middle East, and expectations that central banks may cut interest rates. Spot gold gained 0.6% to $2,735.38 per ounce, and U.S. gold futures were 0.7% higher at $2,750. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Let's recap those headlines. Israel continues to intensify airstrikes over residential buildings in Lebanon. The Lebanese Foreign Ministry condemns Israeli assaults on UNIFIL centers in Lebanon. And dozens of Gazans in Qnews gather to bid farewell to their relatives and loved ones killed in recent Israeli airstrikes. And that's all for now. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY. And you can stay informed as well by tuning in on UMS digital platform Watch It. Thanks very much for watching.